So maybe if I could invite John, David, Tim, Andrew, and Anna to the stage. We are going to be kicking off today with a panel on building the UK as a globally competitive pioneer in research and innovation. We're going to be setting the scene. I think if I move away from this, my microphone should still work. Is that right? Oh, there you go. Looks seamless. We are going to be really setting the scene for the discussion today. We're going to be looking at kind of where we are, where we're heading. Do we have what we need to succeed? We're going to be talking about the strong foundations we already have in the UK in terms of research, academic institutions, innovation, as well as infrastructure. We're going to be talking about how this ecosystem is moving at such a fast pace, increasingly competitive. How do we keep pace? Do we have what we need to move forward? How do we support academia? How do we support industry? How do we support them working together? And how do we have what we need to get this right? So no pressure, guys, but that's quite a lot. We're just going to set the scene for the whole day, and we're going to do it in about 50 minutes. So, up for the task? Yeah, I think so, right. We've got a brilliant panel to kick us off today. We've got, I'm just going to introduce themselves. Well, I will introduce them because otherwise we want to get to the discussion. So I've got John Kingsbury, the CEO of Innovate UK's KTN, Knowledge Transfer Network. David Bloom, Chair of KO Data and our sponsor again today, so thank you, David. Tim Bradshaw, the CEO of the Russell Group. Tim, great to see you. Thanks for being with us. Andrew Scott, founding partner of 7% Ventures. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. And Anna Valerio, Distinguished Policy Fellow at the London School of Economics. Let's welcome them all in the normal way. Okay, a great panel to start, I'm sure you'll agree. So I'm going to be quiet because we want to hear from them now. So let's start with where we are right now and kind of setting the scene for today. And obviously we're talking about building that ecosystem. Of course, we already have an ecosystem, but how do we build it going further? So let's start with perhaps looking at, the research environment, the community, where do we think the UK strengths lie right now in research and innovation? Maybe let's start there from the beginning. John, perhaps we'll go down each of the panelists and what they think, and then we can go from there.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Sue. So the National Science and Technology Framework is already outlined sort of 5 key technology areas for the future. AI, quantum, semiconductors, biology, engineering, and future telecoms. I'd probably add creative industries into that, actually, from a personal point of view. But I mean, I think that's fantastic because it recognises and signals those strengths. And of course, things like the World AI Safety Conference last week, really put the UK front and centre, showcasing our leadership around AI, and things have come from that, et cetera, et cetera. So I would start there because I think it's been a really good statement of intent across those 5 technology areas.
Yeah, it's good to have that focus, and perhaps we'll come on to what that means in terms of research and industry working together on how do we push that forward. But Anna, I'd love your thoughts on, thanks for keeping it so succinct, John. Anna, your thoughts on where the strengths lie right now if you look at the kind of science and innovation and technology ecosystem.
Yeah, so a lot of the work we do at the programme on innovation and diffusion at the LSE is think about what are the UK's relative strengths and how can that inform innovation policy and an industrial growth strategy for the UK. So I was just going to draw on that, but also something that I've had the pleasure of kind of interacting with recently, which is the Global Innovation Index, which is done by the World Intellectual Property Organization. They recently had their UK launch event, and we've done a podcast kind of on the findings. And again, we come out 4th on that. So that's testament to the fact we're a very innovative economy. The US, Sweden, and Switzerland are ahead of us. But what really stands out on that are our technology outputs. So the ideas coming out of universities and the high-tech startups. And those are things that are kind of highlighted. Also, they do this bottom-up measure of where are the most innovative clusters in the world, kind of a geographical analysis. And out of the top 3, Cambridge and Oxford are in there. So it's clear that we really have so much potential that we could be building on more given, our long-standing productivity problems in the UK. We have this really important source of strength. So to be more specific, I mean, that index, as well as our work, has also highlighted the creative sectors, which are obviously very innovative. These are sectors that we're also specialised in terms of trade, so we're actually realising a lot of economic advantage from that. And these are also areas that are growing globally, so it's kind of a future growth opportunity. So in terms of our innovation specialisms that we've been analysing, we look at patenting data often. I know that doesn't capture all innovation, but it's quite nice to measure and compare over time. And again, you can see we've got these specialities in things that match kind of government priorities, things like AI, biotech, robotics, and also crucially clean technologies. Again, all areas that are growing, projected to grow over time. And we actually have something to contribute there. I'll stop there, but I could talk.
No, it's great, and I know I've got more questions about your research later, so we'll come on to that. Tim, great to have you with us. Share your thoughts on the Russell Group's perspective in terms of where you think the strengths lie. Where are we starting from in terms of, strengths?
I mean, the key thing for me, obviously, I'm going to represent 24 research-intensive universities, is that I think the UK has the most fantastic pool of researchers in the UK. So not just the universities themselves, but the people within them. And if we're talking about innovation, you can talk about the technologies and where we have strengths, relative strengths versus China or America or European partners. But to me, it's about the people. And so we've got some of the top researchers across all the sort of fields that Anna was mentioning, maybe second only to the US on some of them or better than them. The thing we have to watch out for is China, because they are really sort of growing. And we have to think about how we want to protect our relative strengths and our competitive advantage in the UK. But I'd always come back to the people. So I see this time and time again when I go out to my universities. It's the researchers that are doing the basic fundamental research, which you'll see in products and innovations, maybe in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time. Or if it's in the biosciences area, it might take 20 years. The COVID vaccine at the Jenner Institute probably took 20 years worth of background research to get it. We delivered it in 6 months or so. Yeah. But you need that sort of fundamental background research behind that. So there's a huge and really, really important research base in the UK, but it's the general students. It's the sort of the undergraduates and the guys who are doing postgraduate talk courses and like coming through our universities and coming out into the workplace. And that because they are your innovators for the future. And I think one thing that we're finding more and more often is, and sorry guys who are already running established businesses, those students are very, very active now in thinking about setting up their own businesses. And I've seen that as a real shift over the last 10 years or so at the Russell Group, where people had ambitions to go and work with big companies, the IBMs, Googles of the world, and they still do. But there's an increasing number who are looking to set up their own entrepreneurial businesses. And as someone said to me recently, students nowadays, with the cost of living crisis and whatever, you'd expect them to go and have sort of second day jobs in Tesco's or wherever to make ends meet. But actually they're coming to universities like ours with side hustles, where they're already thinking about what is their business that they actually want to set up when they leave university. And maybe it's a small thing they can do with some friends. Maybe it's something that will grow into a bigger thing and create a tech unicorn or something like that. So for me, that's the really, really positive thing about the future for the UK is that dynamism amongst the student population and the researchers to make sure that we can be out there and innovate for the future.
Yeah. David, I'm going to come back to you because I'd love to just get Andrew's thoughts following on from Tim's, obviously given your world and your perspective. Is this kind of what you're seeing, that kind of excitement and entrepreneurs kind of really wanting to kind of go through, but also where the strengths from your side?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the really great thing, the great news is that despite Brexit, the UK is still really the venture capital of Europe. Yeah. And if we look at the data, I think back in 22 last year, 2 to 3 times the number of investments were done as any other city, with Paris in second place and Berlin following up behind. And that's absolutely vital when, as Tim says, you're talking about people who start small and want to go big. Yeah. Without that support, without that ecosystem, you really can't get there. And so as an investor, we see that pull still from startups, not just obviously in the UK, but startups in other cities around Europe who look to the UK because perhaps they can't raise funding locally. And so I think, you've got to keep that level of funding available, especially on the growth side, because we have all the innovation. We have, and to Tim's point as well, culturally, I think we are less risk averse than some of our counterparts in Europe. Yeah. We're Anglo-Saxon. We're more on the innovation side culturally towards the US than perhaps some of our European counterparts. And so I think in order to keep feeding that, we've got to make sure that other institutions and other parts of the innovation stack, if you like, such as universities and other things, also follow through. So that means if somebody has come up with a great idea at university and it's a side hustle, but it's actually taking over their lives, the university needs to be supportive of that and actually say, leave your course, go and do this, go and build that tech unicorn.
Yeah. And we'll come on to that in a little bit in terms of how the two are working together and obviously the role of Innovate UK in that. But David, love to get your views and thoughts from, your industry perspective, where the strengths lie, but also, we can then talk a little bit about data because infrastructure is so important to building on those strengths, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'm a bit ahead of my time for Tim in terms of I did start a business in the UK. Admittedly, I don't have an artisan side hustle, so my sourdough is poor. But it was a startup, then a scale up. We have kept it UK headquartered. We provide digital infrastructure in the Golden Triangle and beyond. And so we've seen over the past 10 years some of these innovations grow, particularly in the advanced compute space, in the AI space. I mean, we're lucky to be able to host the Cambridge One, which had played critical roles in research, and we've kind of seen those communities really change the dynamic of what's possible. In terms of, what always struck me is right at the beginning of my journey in the digital infrastructure space. I had the honour of going to see one of the genomics setups, and I won't name names because just in case they're not sponsoring this event. And at that point, it would take them a day or so to process one human genome. Right. And then I again, by chance, visited again 11 years later, and it's just exponential, the growth in capability, the growth in innovation. And so I absolutely buy into that we have the underlying core strengths, we have the drive, we have the talent. It's really, as we're going to discuss, how do we knit that all together and actually win? Not that winning is everything, there's also taking part, but I don't really believe in that. How do we really drive that home? And that's kind of from we're on the ground with infrastructure, and we know some of the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, and we've got also investment as well, right? We've had a number of strategies that come out this year. We've got a number of, as we saw last week, many announcements around investment in AI. We've seen many announcements around investment in quantum, in compute, in semiconductors, in other technologies, and lots of different strategies. So, and obviously you mentioned, John, the Science and Technology Framework talks about making science and technology the driver of prosperity, and as we drive forward. And David, obviously your technology you're providing as the infrastructure is enabling that, right? Do you see that as your role is in terms of, okay, well, how do we then take all this and make this actually happen, like put innovation into action, which is what we're talking about today? Absolutely.
We are the picks and shovels in the gold rush. But I believe in the gold rush as well, in the sense of there is gold in those hills, and we need the infrastructure on every level. Obviously, we provide what's called digital infrastructure. So I don't know why I'm educating this room, on the off chance that somebody's wandered into the wrong place. Ultimately, this is really the connectivity through fibre and the storage through data centres, which really allows all of the digital economy to exist. Having said that, we are facing power challenges, we are facing planning challenges, we are facing skill shortages, we are facing all sorts of things that if we don't work out ways to overcome them, to improve those situations, we will actually, perhaps in the classic English style, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So I'm very passionate about how we work with all the stakeholders, from the end user all the way through to the institutions and the government, because that is a key element to how we make something that's really good, really great. Yeah, because that's important. We have all this
investment, we have all this focus. It's, how do we then put it in the right place, and how do we help that investment utilize, supporting technology and research innovation? John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel the question coming to me. That's it. Yeah, so Innovate UK, the UK's innovation agency, obviously we're a key enabler, both of commercialization from the research base, but also for businesses, innovative businesses looking to grow. And we provide a range of support, not just funding, but also non-funding support to support businesses and commercializations of technology. So, for example, Innovate UK iCure program works with universities across the UK, teams that are looking to commercialize their research into business. Last year, I think we worked with 119 teams across the UK looking to commercialize their research. But we also support feasibility studies across those 5 technologies and across a broader range. And that, depending on what businesses need in their innovation journey, we support a whole range of different activities through from that commercialization. Then to include working with investors, we have a program called Investor Partnerships, where we convene coalitions and consortia of cohorts of investors and match that with grant funding, so that actually things that you get from investors that you don't necessarily receive from public funded world, NEDs, advice, connections on to investment at a later stage, we bridge that gap as well. So we have a range of different areas of support that really cover the whole journey from commercialization to scale up.
Yeah, because that's really important, right, Andrew, is that how these bits of the puzzle fit together. Do you think we're getting that right from an investment point of view?
Where to start? I think some of it, yes. And I mean, Innovate UK does a fantastic job in many areas funding some of this technology. I think that if you're like us, so we're a venture investor. We've done 150 early stage investments. So we work with founders right at the beginning of their journey. And when we see one of the challenges when we see technology coming out of universities is that the motivations are misaligned. And if you're trying to build a venture scale startup, you need the people.
Yeah.
The good news is we have those in spades. We have extremely smart people at universities and within industry. You then need the money. And there is a very good ecosystem of early stage capital in the UK. But you then need the ambition, and I think this is where sometimes the motivations start to drift, because as a venture investor, there is a playbook for funding a venture startup. And if you come out of a university and you've been misadvised or you've been forced to give away 40% of your company out of the gate, then that is not an investable business. You give away 10 to 30% of your business each round. If you're going to be, I don't know, the next global or the global quantum computing winner, then you're probably going to do 5, 6, 7 rounds of funding. So it's important that universities get up to speed on how that playbook works, and that we move away from a rather sort of parochial view of, I need to own as much of this business as possible because I'm desperate for a return. And sometimes that's in cahoots with rather backward investors as well, who sort of take far too much of the business, and that's a problem. And I think if universities should see some upside from these innovations that have created, but that needs to be on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
And we need to recognise that that means the business needs to come out of the gate without any friction to raising that money.
Yeah.
So often we've had to turn around and told the founder to use us as the bad cop and turn around and say, well, we've got this investment of $500,000 or $1 million, but actually you can't have 30%. You're going to have to take 5%, otherwise we can't get in the investment. And then after some very difficult conversations, that's often happened for the companies we've invested in. But for the founders who perhaps don't meet an investor like us, they end up with a cap table which is broken, and that's a problem.
Yeah. So thank you, Andrew. We are moving into that kind of commercialization. Oh, hello. Sorry about that. Was that me? Okay, we're moving into like commercialization and building stronger relationships between academia and industry, or academia and entrepreneurs and innovators. So I don't know, Tim, do you want to come back on that kind of question, or that? I mean, I wanted to kind of explore, how research institutions, how academia is, powering the innovation, but also, what does that mean in terms of building stronger relationship? Then Anna, would love to come and talk about some of your research. But Tim, do you want to?
Can I pick up
pick
on
up
the sort of the spin out bit as well, though, because that is key to make sure we actually get that right. The challenge for universities is they do want to make sure that they get some return from the system, and we don't operate, much as we'd love to. We don't operate in the UK like a Silicon Valley or a Cambridge in the US. The ecosystem isn't quite as developed here as it would be in those sort of places. So you find universities actually, in many cases, having to provide further support for their startups to get them to a place where they are investable. So you can see from their mentality the need to sort of hold on to more of the sort of the equity value. But I think there is a good discussion to have about where that sits, because it is probably different for different types of IP. If it's a sort of biological sciences, STEM-based sort of thing, it might need to be higher. If it's a sort of software type thing, yes, it probably is. It could easily be much lower. I think for the sort of the plea from universities would be, let's have that as a sensible conversation, and let's talk about other things as well, because we never talk about royalties, whereas they would do in the US, and I think that's probably part of the equation. And maybe if we can sort of switch a little bit from equities to royalties, we might get rather more of those things out of the door and being investable. So I think there's a conversation to have there with the investment community to make sure that we can do that better. I mean, within the universities themselves, the thing that's probably had the biggest impact on what we can do is a thing called HIFE, the Higher Education Innovation Fund, which has been going for many years now in different sort of guises, but it's the lubricant, if you will. It's the money that allows universities to be able to support tech transfer offices, to be able to build capacity and capabilities to get some of the initial startup activity going, to bring in people who might be able to manage startups and get to a point where things can be invested.
So kind of at the starting level.
Yeah. And it's fine. It works really, really well. We've done analysis which shows £1 in is worth £12 out for the economy in terms of the return on investment we get, which is very good on any sort of treasury econometric sort of analysis. But the amount of funding has always been very, very low. It's the baseline, I think, is around about £270 million a year, and it's capped in terms of how much any individual university can have. So. And I will mention names. I mean, for example, in Cambridge, there are two universities, Anglia Ruskin and Cambridge University, and for many years, both those universities were at the cap in terms of the amount of money they could get out of that system. And whilst Anglia Ruskin is a fantastic university, does really, really good job on teaching and supporting sort of local communities across the east of England, it's not in the same research space as Cambridge. And you think there's something a little bit broken there if Cambridge can't get the sort of money out of the door into the door to actually support startups that it needs. So my plea to the investor community is, let's have sensible conversations about IP equity and things like that. My plea to the government is, let's actually try and make sure we've got the lubricant in the right places in the right volume to make sure we can capitalise on the research we've got to get those startup and ventures going early on.
Yeah.
Can I just pick up one point quickly on that?
John just wanted.
I mean, I've seen tech transfer office jobs advertised at sort of 30k. When the best one in the world, you're perhaps not going to get the best person who understands the ecosystem into that role, advising startups at 30k. And so, to your point around funding of tech transfer offices, I think that's fair. On the other point of, I think there are different structures for different types of business. And I agree with that, but I also do think that it's the university should not be prioritising how to maximise its return from startups. I believe a university's job is to remove all friction to getting that technology into the market. And as early stage investors and accelerators, of which we're lucky to have very many in the UK, I think that the investor community will do its job there to pick those startups up and run with them. But it's not helpful when a company comes to me and I look at their cap table and 60% of it's gone to a university, perhaps some sort of researcher who's no longer in the business who invented the technology, and a parochial investor who's been in cahoots with the tech transfer office because they think it's a good idea to own 30% of that business. And then we're sorry, we can't help you guys.
David, did you want to come in?
No, in some ways it's a slight angle change, but my problems are a lot more basic than this. In the sense of we do in the data center industry anyway have a skills shortage, a real skills shortage. So by 2025 we need another 300,000 skilled workers. I mean, good luck to us with that. Yeah. And actually, it's elements like that power policy. We were discussing this the other day. Even transportation links. I mean, some of this stuff is not to do with really sort of innovative or complicated things. It's really actually getting the basics right. Yeah. Because as Andrew says, we have those innovative people. Yeah. So they're going to do that bit. Yeah. In my view. What we need to get all of the platform right and in place, to kind of allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And there is a big education piece in that. It's education not only of students, in the sense of yes, we need skilled workers into the workforce, but it's also across the piece in terms of when I end up sitting in front of a council, for example, talking about developing a data center campus, and one of the councillors comes up to me afterwards and asks me why in the US do they call them databases and in the UK do they call them data centers. I sort of have to say, well, that's because those are two different things, right? So education shouldn't just stop when we leave university. We need to educate stakeholders, educate government, educate even sort of suppliers and businesses of what does this sector need, so that we can grow, because without that we won't.
Yeah, and part of that is also from a kind of industry point of view, academia and research, it's talking the same kind of language as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Is that we conceptually there's amazing things to come, but we need to break them down into basic deliverables, and what those deliverables need, and then build on that. So that's where I think that community outreach and the things that we get involved in is so key, because otherwise we're not actually telling people our kids in school today, the classic, our kids in school today learning what they need for the jobs of tomorrow. Not convinced.
Yeah. We'll come back to that, David, as well.
Sure.
It's such a big topic in review, but thanks for bringing that in, because it's important that we look at, there's lots of different layers of this, right?
100%.
Lots of different things that we need to get right, but this is all part of setting the scene for today, so thank you. John, did you want to very quickly come in before Anna? We'll come to your...
Sorry, Anna. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to do a build on your point, David, which is that when we think about our world-class research base, we, in addition to thinking about commercialization, we also do need to acknowledge the capability in that research base. And so therefore...
So capability and skills, then?
Capability, skills of the people who do fantastic research in universities, and that is relevant for business as well. So building stronger connections between our research base and business is important. And the second thing I think is that that's not just in the Golden Triangle. Actually, that is all across UK.
Yeah.
So to bring those 2 points together, Innovate UK knowledge transfer partnerships, for example, we work with every university in the UK. We have 800 projects in flight at the moment, live. And that's a program where it brings together the capability of early stage researchers with the university facilities, capabilities with businesses to help solve business challenges or innovations. And some of the most inspiring projects are, in places that you wouldn't necessarily find them, because that capability is buried away in universities, and actually fantastic opportunity to leverage the skills and capability that we have across our research base. And then showcasing those will inspire new generations, I think, of people to, if you see something impressive, that inspires young people to then go and believe they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anna, Thank you for being so patient. We wanted to come back a little bit more about your research, because your research looks at how the UK kind of compares to other nations in this area, particularly in terms of academia and innovation and research. So, and the strengths of our research institutions. So why do you think that is that? Why is that the UK is stronger compared to other nations? What would you highlight or what would you flag?
Well, I think, we have a very long established university sector. It's been expanded at various stages over our history, particularly post World War II. There was a Robbins expansion, which was not only motivated by wanting more kind of access to education for everyone, but also very much by the kind of Cold War kind of science race that was going on. So this real expansion in R&D and the science base.
It goes back a long way, right? We've got a legacy here.
And so we've traditionally been a very successful destination for overseas talent in our universities. We're one of the most, if you look at the share of the student body, the share of overseas students is, I think, fourth in the latest OECD data. Obviously, a great destination for international talent in research and in firms as well. Of course, Brexit has been a bit of a headwind to that, and we know people have left, but we are now part of Horizon Europe again, so that's good news.
Great news.
I think, I agree that it's not just the Golden Triangle. I think the Golden Triangle are absolutely fundamental for the nation's success, not only for what they generate in their own region, but also via spillovers, because one of the things we track in some of our work is kind of spillovers in innovation through citations, either from academic papers into patents or between patents. And you really find that the research going on there does benefit the rest of the country. And when you look at some of the excellence in academic institutions and how that spills over into commercialized innovations, again, you'll see Oxford and Cambridge, you'll see Imperial College right up there, but we also see places like St Andrews, Sheffield, Manchester, Birmingham, particularly on clean cars, as you'd have thought, like net zero vehicles. So there are a lot of these strengths. And we need to protect that and build on it. But I would actually just want to go back to some of the broader discussion we've had, because we talked very much about how you get the ideas into tech startups, which hopefully then become unicorns. But there is this broader piece of why are we not investing enough in the UK? Some of the points we heard on infrastructure, they're kind of endemic to other parts of infrastructure, whether it's the net zero infrastructure we need. There are planning barriers. There's policy uncertainty. We really do need kind of a broader strategy and more stability on some of these things that businesses need to make their investments. And then part of that as well that I wanted to be a bit broader about, which I think you mentioned, was it's not just the kind of idea to start up, but it's just collaboration between universities and existing businesses, some of which will be large. And there are barriers to that. So the Paul Nurse review into the research, development and innovation landscape, it did conclude from talking to many people and also looking at things like the UK Innovation Survey that kind of asked businesses, where do you get information? There's definitely room for improvement in that collaboration space. And part of it, so not just thinking now of the academic who wants to found a business, thinking of an established academic who will continue being an academic. Their career incentives are not necessarily aligned with the firm or a large firm or a medium-sized firm's incentives. So how can you kind of create career structures that can reward those people that do want to do that kind of activity?
Yeah, really fascinating. And there's a lot there we could unpack. Tim, did you want to just quickly come in?
Yeah, can we talk nuclear submarines at this point?
I mean, we can if you'd like. What would you like to talk about nuclear submarines?
Right.
Because Anna mentioned stability and stability in sort of for investment for large firms, for anybody trying to develop technology over a longer period of time. There's lots of obviously disruptive stuff that happens, it's very quick, but there's other stuff that happens over a longer period of time. And one of the things that we've been challenged with in the UK is not having an industrial strategy. And so therefore, if you don't know where you're going, it's very difficult. We've seen that with electric vehicles and things. It's taken so long to get to the point where we are now. Basically, most of the technology in terms of the big OEMs is owned overseas rather than within the UK, even if some of the production happens here. So why did I mention nuclear submarines? Because you mentioned AI and quantum and things at the beginning of the talk. So I don't know if you're aware, we have this thing called AUKUS, which is the UK, US and Australia helping Australia build nuclear submarines and get access to that technology for the future. And why on earth am I rattling on about that? Well, AUKUS is an industrial strategy, because if you think about how long it takes to design and build a nuclear submarine and get one into service, and then actually its service lifetime and its decommissioning lifetime, it's something like 40 odd years in service, probably 10, 15 years to get it built and designed to start off with, then you're decommissioning it. So we're talking 50 plus years, 60 years. That is an industrial strategy that the government has set itself down the path of in terms of delivering submarines. Sitting alongside that, because that's called Pillar 1 of AUKUS, is Pillar 2. And that's where all of you should be very interested, because Pillar 2 is all around the science and technology that would underpin not just nuclear submarines, but the sorts of technologies that we're going to need for the future, some of which will end up in defence applications, many will end up spilling over into commercial applications. And core to that are things like AI, quantum, other types of, sort of computing developments, underseas technologies, big data, and variety of things. The other countries in the partnership, Australia and the US, talk about these endlessly, about this is the future, these are the things. In the UK, I don't think we've done that yet. So I've seen the government obviously talk a lot about AI recently. That was the big thing. There's a little bit about quantum here or there, and that sort of dribbles away, and there'll be something else next week. What I'd love to see is a proper AUKUS Pillar 2 strategy, which brings the tech companies, brings the universities, brings the research base together to deliver on AI, on quantum, on undersea technologies, on all the other things that they think they might need for the future. So I think that would then be a driver of innovation. And I think that's one of the things we've always seen as a problem. And Sue and I used to work together a long time ago at the CBI. One of the problems that we have in the UK is not having some of the procurement pull to bring through innovative ideas more quickly into the market. And that's the sort of stability thing that sort of Anna was talking about. If we knew that there were things that we could aim at, then that helps to drive some of that pipeline of innovation and R&D development, as well as the wacky stuff which will come along anyway from sort of bottom up. Have a bit more of that sort of stability and a pull. And I think that's one of the areas where we can do that. I'd love to see that in another area like clean tech, for the net zero, and probably 3 or 4 other things you could do. But there's one at least we could grab hold of at the moment.
It's market signalling. David?
Market signalling, yeah.
I mean, that is fascinating. You've definitely lightened the panel up the top of neither. But the last time I surveyed my staff, none of them take a submarine to work, right? And so they need trains, which we've just canned. Yeah, they need better road infrastructure. Yeah, they need better 4G, 5G, 6G. Yeah, so I mean, again, I newsflash, I don't run the country. Yeah, but I struggle to understand where the priorities lie if we're going to do large infrastructure projects or things that take 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. Surely there are things that would be more accretive to this discussion than a sort of knock-on effect Pillar 2 activity. But I may be missing something.
Or maybe it's both.
You need both.
Right? I think.
So we've got one. So submarines are coming, which is great.
Submarines are coming, guys.
And they want the one when it opens up and it comes out like in Thunderbirds. But then I also would like the buses to be better.
So I wanted to come on to, and in the time that we have left, wanted to come on to that, David, of how do we get the as you put it, the foundations right. The infrastructure, the skills, government support. What do we need to really make this work? I was going to ask you in terms of what where do you think we need to build the right infrastructure to support and help innovation? So I was thinking compute infrastructure, but please, expand.
Look, compute infrastructure is key, and there's no doubt. Of course, firstly, I think it's a fact. Secondly, of course, I believe in it. That's what we do.
Of course.
But there's also all the infrastructure around that, right? Economies. It's called the digital economy, right? Yeah. So the economy part needs all the other bits, in order to make it work. I would say something though before I sort of lambast government policy, which is not what I'm here to do. I think it needs to be collaborative. I think we need to work together, and businesses have a level of responsibility as well. Yeah. We as a business are involved in UTC Heathrow, where they've got a digital futures program. We're going into Key Stage 2 schools. We are taking part. We took part in establishing in Harlow the enterprise zone. Why? Because there has to be a public-private partnership. Yeah. I don't believe it's just the sole responsibility of one stakeholder here to get this right. However, there does need to be a focus on. I think it was actually Andrew mentioned, and he'll say, he can Tell your Paris story on the train. I like that one.
Oh, well, I'd love to be able to have a meeting on the train from London to Cambridge and it not drop 25 times, because there just isn't coverage. Whereas, yeah, I mean, last year I went all the way from Rome down to Sicily, 7-hour train journey, 4G, 5G all the way. Didn't drop once. I had multiple meetings. Yeah, I can't get from London to Cambridge to have a meeting.
That's the problem, right? Because it's getting in the way, right? And so I think there's investment opportunities in that. There's return opportunities in that. None of this has to just be provided on a plate, I don't think. But on the other hand, is that there needs to be a plan that we can all buy into. So yes, digital infrastructure, absolutely key. Yeah, but we will carry on delivering that. The reality is the sector is delivering that. Yeah, there needs to be other aspects to it which will help all of the discussion we've just had get these people and this innovation and these businesses really thriving because they have the base that they need.
Yeah, they have what they need.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of nodding there. Well, Anna, I saw you nodding along to what David was saying. Anything you'd like to come in on?
Yeah, so I wanted to just mention the Economy 2030 inquiry, which is something we've been working on at the LSC in collaboration with Resolution Foundation. It's a 3-year inquiry, and it's really looking at what a new economic strategy for the UK will look like. And within that, we've done quite a lot of work on how to improve the business investment ecosystem, and that relies on public sector investment, as you say, but a lot of the investment we need is from the private sector, so it's about how do you use public sector investment in a catalytic way and create appropriate partnerships. But if we're thinking about the types of policies that we need to boost business investment, particularly now that we're in very fiscally constrained times, there are actually lots of things that can be done which are kind of regulatory or reforms that we know are barriers. Planning, you've already mentioned, and this is holding back investment in many ways, literally holding back investment in some of the data centres, in labs, for example, in Oxford and Cambridge, in allowing workers to go and work in the really productive agglomerations and allow them to be innovative in the firms that want to hire them. So, there are lots of things that we know can be addressed. And then, so some of it is horizontal. We call it horizontal in economics, things that you can just apply across the economy. And then there's the industrial strategy part too. Yeah. So we've had a very on-off relationship with industrial strategy in recent years in terms of whether we have a national one. But then there are many examples of industrial strategies we do have for specific technologies, for specific sectors. So it's about how do you unify that in a framework that can be clearly understood and also has some kind of credibility that it will last over time when governments change.
The longer term rather than shorter term. So I'm afraid to say we are run or have run out of time, but there's so many threads here, which actually I think will be picked up throughout the day. So you've all done an amazing job of setting the scene and setting us going. And I'm sorry we didn't get time for questions, but I know all the speakers will be around, so you can grab them afterwards. But also, if you have a question on a particular topic and it comes up later on during the day, then please let's see if we can pull these threads all together. We're obviously taking all the input and all the insights from all the sessions today to kind of think about, well, what's techUK's role? How can we help? How can we bring, how could we help convene communities together to really understand the opportunities but potential barriers? David, how do we get those digital basics and those foundations right? And how do we obviously support the work Innovate UK is already doing and what more we could be doing together? But I'm just going to take chair's prerogative. If I can just look at Laura and see if that's all right. Yes, just ask perhaps our panel for a final thought, something they'd like to leave the audience with. We've been talking about building the UK as a globally competitive pioneer in research and innovation. Key kind of takeaways you want people to kind of keep in mind. Andrew, let's start with you. Final thought or final call to action, maybe.
Yeah, I think the technologies being developed now, be it next generation AI, be it quantum computing, be it future compute, new semiconductors, really will define the UK economy over the next 10 to 20 years. And the news recently of the target to put 50 billion with the Mansion House Compact with the VCs into venture to go into these technologies is fantastic. But it's absolutely critical those go into those step change technologies, into those technologies which will underpin our economy, which will help build nuclear submarines, and not into iterative B2B SaaS and fintech, because those guys, they'll all take care of themselves. There's plenty of money out there for those. This money has to underpin the fundamental technologies of the future, because we have an opportunity in the UK to step change our economy and our growth and go back up the GDP ladder if that money goes into these technologies. Because we have the skills, we just need the backing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. David?
So a bit of a follow-on. I mean, I think we're at the foothills, as Andrew says, of a really fundamental shift. And my plea, I suppose, is that we are positioned in the UK to lead that shift even from an infrastructure perspective beyond our shores. So taking our innovative designs and physical infrastructure to European cities, to even further afield, and delivering those as part of a global infrastructure play. So fun fact, the KO Data is the only UK-founded, UK-funded data center operator in Europe. Strong statement. Just checking with the team. They're nodding. So that's still a fact. Now we need more of those. Actually, I want more competition. I want people to really innovate in this space. So this is why that platform, that framework, has to happen, because we've got some really talented people, and they need to be on a world stage, not just on the UK stage.
Great that we keep coming back to people as well. It's definitely important. Tim, final thoughts?
Yeah, can I go back to
Submarines?
Right, no, not submarines. Right back to sort of the beginning of where some of this starts. There's people on the one side, the other side is the research. And for us, one of the key things was getting Horizon Europe Association agreed. That was a fantastic day. That means that we can continue to collaborate in Europe. I want to see us making a strong commitment to Framework Programme 10 so that we can build that and be involved for the next sort of 7 years. But fundamentally, there's an issue in the UK in terms of the commitment from the government towards research and development. We currently spend something like 2.7% of GDP on R&D. If you fiddle the figures, actually, I think it's probably more like 2.5% of GDP. Our OECD competitors are better than that. And, it's not all about the numbers, but if we're way behind our G7 competitors, then we're already starting on the back foot. And so what we'd really like to see is this government and the next government genuinely make a commitment to reach 3% of GDP spent on R&D, or invested on R&D, and bank that and then move on from there, because our competitors in Germany and the US and China are already spending 3.5%, 4%. And we've got to catch up. We've got to actually catch up and embed that and then allow that money to go into universities, into research institutions, into businesses to build the next generation of technologies and ideas. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be even further down the ladder in 5-10 years' time, because China will definitely overtake us.
Thanks, Tim. Anna?
I would agree on the R&D, and that is part of kind of gross fixed capital formation, which we call business investment, which also is low. So it's not just the R&D we need to be investing in, it's the new software, it's the hardware, the physical structures to house these things, etc. And so we've discussed some of the barriers to all of that. I would say, coming to Andrew's point about where support should be targeted, so if we're going to try and get more of our institutional wealth into the high growth space, and I think it's what you said was, target it to the places that the market won't sort out. And that's kind of the fundamental thing that economists tend to think about. If government's going to step in, do it where there's a market failure. So I think we need kind of really good analysis on where the market failures are, that actually we do need that kind of long-term patient capital. And there's the role for government there too. And just finally,
Very quickly.
I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. We have these great strengths internationally, that we can kind of solve global challenges and national challenges, but we do have these barriers. And I would say, we have the really great skills here in the UK, but there are skill gaps, we know, in the wider economy. And actually, if you look at IT skills and the need for constant updating with AI and other things, we need to be thinking not just through the skills coming through the education system, but lifelong learning as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Thanks, Anna. And then final words, John.
So I'll be super quick.
Go on then.
So innovation, as we know, innovation drives prosperity, growth, also creates products and services that benefit all of us. So often businesses just simply don't know what support or what connections are available to us. We have a very sophisticated innovation system in the UK. I would say if you are a business looking to make connections into the research base or thinking about innovating, don't really know how to go about it, need a bit of help navigating the system, come and talk to us at Innovate UK, KTN.
That's a great place to land as well, because I think I've taken a lot of this it's about people, it's about convening those conversations and discussions and bringing people together, and that's what we're all about here at techUK, and it's what the summit's about today as well. As I said, we'll be taking all of this and looking at what we need to do next. But a fascinating panel, I hope you'll agree, that's really set us off for the day. Can we please thank Andrew, David, Tim, Anna and John in the normal way for really kicking us off today in a brilliant way. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And now I'm going to be leaving you. I'll be back later to talk about responsible and ethical innovation. But I think I'm handing over to Laura Foster. Laura, do you want to come on down, as they say? It's another terrible reference that probably half of you don't get. And honestly, that's the rest of my jokes. But thank you, everybody, for joining us, please. And Laura, I'll hand over to you and your next panel.